Week 8, Class 2, Value, Shadow, and Light. In looking at the way that light falls, you have to see where the light is coming from, how it strikes the object. There are very predictable things that happen. There's a highlight, there's a middle tone, there's reflected light toward the bottom of the object, and very importantly, and it's really important to see this by squinting your eyes, there's a shadow edge or core shadow that happens where two planes, the lightest plane starts to turn and hit the darkest plane. After that, toward the left, there's a middle dark tone, and of course, then at the bottom, there's a shadow. Here I have set up a very similar situation with a round styrofoam ball that's lit from the right, and it's making a shadow, and now I'm going to start to draw that. In beginning to draw, the first thing that you want to notice is you want to make little marks, little dots that indicate where the orb is. You never ever want to use lines because lines defeat the purpose of making value. When you look at an object, you don't see big lines around it. It's soft. What distinguishes light and shadow are the differences between the value steps. And that is why I have my value chart posted right on my page. So I might look at the drapery behind and say, well, that's kind of a number 4. Let me indicate where that is. I'm working here with vine charcoal, and I'm just notating some of the lights and darks. The first thing I did was I drew the value of the drapery by coming up to the object. I'm not going ever with the edge of the object. I'm differentiating it. Watch what I'm doing now by coming across that plane and back and forth to make a distinct shape. And that's what you're working toward, just like you worked with your value chart, and it took a good long while to make each step consistent, exactly parallel to the next step and what you wanted it to look like. But also, now I'm working on a big piece of paper to unify all of those areas to make a kind of uniform and consistent statement of value. So what I'm indicating now is I'm using the stump. So I put the material down. I have a plan about making the difference between the background and the white of the ball. And I'm pulling that material together by using my stump. So sometimes you use the direction of the mark in one way and you use the stump to uniform and make a uniform statement of value. Now, importantly, I'm using my hand to just make a lighter value tone in the white part of the ball because it's not white. And almost nothing in the world, except perhaps when you're looking out the window on a sunny day, is just what you would call white. So I've got that whole value established by just kind of smearing some vine charcoal in that area, and that's what you need. It's hard to make a light value with mark making. And then I've erased out the highlight. So I just continue to work here in trying to establish the subtleties of the value. Notice that when I'm working in the background here, all of my marks are horizontal or vertical. See that, the way that my vertical marks are coming right up to the edge of the ball. Then I make horizontal lines on top of it. This is super important because you want that drapery behind the ball to read as going back into space. So all of the marks that you make on that should be consistent with one another. Otherwise, it looks like it's a kind of patchwork. And instead, you want that whole plane to hold in a solid way. So again, I'm just working horizontal, vertical marks. I'll continue to work in pulling up or making that more consistently uniform using my stump. Now I'm working on that core shadow, which happens between the lighter plane and the darker plane. Obviously, you're building your dark, so it takes time to work on something that has so much subtlety, and you're trying to make these solid values. In making a value drawing, you have to look very carefully, and squinting your eyes is really a very important part of it. Otherwise, you really can't see these different distinctions, particularly, for example, in the highlighted area, where the difference between that one white sitting in that light plane is difficult to see. So you have to practice that. What I begin to work on, just again like the value chart, is making the shapes of light and shadow as distinctive as I possibly can. So here you are working with vine charcoal or any kind of charcoal. It has a point on it, and you need to pull it together to make a clear value step. So here I'm working, and you can see the direction of my marks carves through that ball around its edge. They're all going, all those marks are going the same direction. And I'm keeping that little light on the bottom so you can see from the photograph that that's the reflected light. Reflected light happens because the light is bouncing off of the tabletop back onto the object. You would perhaps think that it continues to be dark, but there's always a little bit of a light that happens toward the bottom. This is the finished drawing. I've tried to make all of the value steps as solid as I could and to capture the subtleties of light throughout.